Hey guys, I'm Matt, this is my beard. In this video we're going to tackle the sculptor, but in this one I think I'm going to go a bit grimdark. Let's do it. In this video I'm going to try doing grimdark on the sculptor. Now in my previous video I did a more fantasy focused colour scheme for Rose, and as you can see that landed quite nicely on the model and I'm really quite happy with how that came out. I think points of improvement would be the skin and the flesh, but in this video we're focusing predominantly on the actual cloth itself. This was more like a leather sort of hide jacket that we focused on. However, in this one we're going to focus on sculptor and his tunic. So as you can see, I have already base coated it, and there's two major panels. So he's got an apron at the front, and then also he's got his main tunic with a couple of cords around his neck as well, so in sort of like a rope bow. Now that's going to be quite an interesting one, and there's also some folds on the actual the fabric itself. So for this we're going to call it cloth, and it has been repatched in areas, so we'll have to do some different colourings on those, I think. He does have a cord going around his waist as well, and he has two daggers on his waist, so that'll be quite interesting to see how we tie that all in. So let's just jump straight into the paint. Now I do have a couple of paints lined up, and I've also got my sponge bits too. I will be stippling them on and building up. Now on this one I'm not just going to stay with the purples and the pinks. I'm going to try with Rhinox hide going into Chapthers bone, and I'm going to layer up across that as I go. So I think I'm going to start off with the Rhinox hide and Gawthor brown, so do like a blended stipple through those two colours, whilst in between going in with the Agrax Earth shade. I'm then going to bring it up to in between Gawthor brown and a Chapthers bone, and I'm going to use Seraphim sepia to bring it back down again, and then I'm going to do a couple of small stipples of the Chapthers bone on the highest point. So I think outside of that, nothing more to go through. Let's get painting. So far this is actually turning out much better than I anticipated doing so. You can already see the texture starting to appear on the cloth, which I think is phenomenal. Now the steps I've taken so far: Rhinox hide stippled on first, then I've gone in with the Agrax Earth shade, and then from the Agrax Earth shade I've gone into a 50-50 Gawthor brown and Rhinox hide, and it's starting to come out quite nice. So I think I'm now going to go in with just pure Gawthor brown, stipple it on the higher areas, and I'm going to be a little bit more tactical about where I put those stipples, I think, because so far this is turning out really quite impressive. We're starting to get somewhere really nice with this now. I think what I'm going to jump onto now, I think we need to blend some Chapthers bone in, and I think I need to bring in a smaller sponge, because this is, I mean, you can see just from, if you look at the chest area there, it's actually starting to really like layer on nicely. The texture is exactly how I wanted it to be, and I didn't really come into this with any preconceived notion other than a bit of texture on the actual cloth work, but this is brilliant. I've gone in with an additional layer of the Agrax Earth shade in between the Gawthor brown step and now, and as you can see it's brought it back down to where we want it to be, and then soon we'll be jumping onto the Seraphim sepia once we've started integrating Chapthers bone into there. So I think it's time to jump onto that. So I think I'm going to do this in real time, just to show you how easy it is. Now this is a 50-50 mix of the Chapthers bone and the Gawthor brown. I'm just stippling whilst going out of focus apparently. Ham stippling in the areas on his uppermost chest and any raised areas as well. Now, I did take off quite a bit of the excess from this. However, as you can see, we're now getting somewhere quite decent with this. Now I'm going to leave the trouser area a little bit darker, but I think I'm now going to jump into quickly dry that off. So I've now dried that off. Now let's jump in with some Seraphim Sepia now. That's very close. Sorry about that. So I'm going to just get my thick belly brush, jump in, get the excess off. There we go. Let's see how this lands. So that's giving me more of a yellow tan brown as opposed to the dark brown that we've been pairing with so far, but that's fine because we're looking to increase the brightness a little bit before we move on to the Ushabti bone. So let's just bring that back through, going back over all the leather areas. I'm now going to dry off and see how it looks. And so far, so good. Now you can see the texture starting to reveal itself, and that's a good thing. We do have quite a few layers going on now. This is still just drying off, but I'm really happy with how this has turned out. I think I need to start considering brushwork once I've done my final stipple tone with my Ushabti bone, but outside of that, I think we are ready to rock and roll. And there we have a nearly finished product. So I now have to do all of the detail work, but as you can see on the actual defined areas of cloth, outside of this back panel here, where I am going to go back in and just touch up some areas, just around this area here. I just need to get rid of that. So just around this area here, I need to touch that up a little bit because this is obviously going to be his trouser section. But outside of that, I think we're just on at the touch-up phase now, and I can start going on to his hat and his shoes, his trousers, the two belts, so the one around his neck, the one around his waist, and then obviously his skin and his gloves. And not to mention his joyful hammer and his chisel. Let's get cracking. And this is where we find ourselves. So I'm about to go on to the final details, so the skin and the hammer and the chisels. However, just for now, I'll show you what I've done. Now, I applied a Rhinox hide, and then I blended that with a 50-50 mix of corn red and Rhinox hide for the hat, gloves, and boots. And for the boots exclusively, I've then shaded it down with Agrax Earthshade. And I think that slight red shift is really just adding a little bit more dynamicism to the model. I'm quite happy with the simple Agrax Earthshade and Gothor Brown trousers. I think that adds a bit more contrast to the Ushabti bone tunic. But overall, I'm thinking this has turned out really quite cool. It'll be interesting to see how the skin lends itself to the model and see what it looks like as a final product. Now there is a little bit of hair underneath the hat, so I'm going to have to think of how I'm going to paint that in. I think I might actually try ginger. I've got a couple of oranges here, so I think I might try and give them a bit of a strawberry flair. Right, let's crack on. And there we have one finished sculptor. So overall, I'm quite happy with how this has turned out. I think the stippling technique on cloth really quite works. You can see the depth of detail, but you can also see that it is a little bit messy in places, and that kind of adds to the grimdark appeal. Using both the Seraphim Sepia and also the Agrax Earthshade to shade up, from the base colour of Rhinox Hide, going through to Gawthorpe Brown, then going into the Chablis Bone, and then half stepping in between with a 50-50 mix of each. I feel it works quite nicely, and it lends itself well to quite a strong base texture. And texture's the real key here. Texture's the thing that we were looking for, and I think we've succeeded in that. Now, obviously, this technique for me is quite new, but it is quite a well-known technique from what I've come to understand. So I think for me, I'm going to try and practice this on a few other miniatures and see how I get on. But outside of that, really happy with how it's turned out. For the metal parts, so the head of the hammer, the chisels, I've used a colour called Warp Lock Bronze, and it's a citadel colour. And it's a bit of a dark bronze, and I think that ties in the Rhinox Hide quite nicely. The 50-50 mix of Rhinox Hide and Corn Red for the leather bits as well. I think that's a really true leather colour, and I think one thing I'm going to look at doing in the future is trying to scuff the areas up. So the large panel, for example, on the top of the hat, maybe get some scratch marks and wear marks in there as true leather would. But outside of that, really quite happy with how this has turned out. This is a bit of an experiment for me, and I think I quite enjoyed it. Alongside Rose, these two do look like they're fresh from a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and that was kind of what I was looking to achieve with these two. And they work well together. Obviously, I know I've done the bases the same, so they're tied into each other, but overall, I'm quite happy with how it's finally landed and finished. So that's it from me for this week's painting video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please drop me a like. And if you're new and you haven't done so already, please drop me a subscribe. That would be really great. We've passed 100 subscribers. I think we're at 131 now, which is phenomenal. I'm really, really happy with how that's going. So thank you very much if you have already subscribed. But outside of that, guys, I've been Matt. This has been another painting video surrounding cloth, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you guys later. Bye-bye.